Good evening and welcome everyone to today's webinar. This is our very first episode of Workforce Excellence series. And on behalf of Mediacent Interactive, I'd like to warmly welcome each one of you to today's webinar from wherever you're joining us from across Africa. We appreciate you taking this time and also being part of this conversation. So let's dive deep into workforce excellence. So this series has been created to bring together business leaders, also HR professionals, operations teams, finance leaders, and technology specialists to discuss workforce challenges organizations face every day and explore practical approaches to solving these problems. Today's discussion is going to be centered on workforce intelligence. This is an area that is becoming increasingly important as organizations strive to improve productivity, accountability, compliance, and overall business performance. People have remained one of the most valuable assets as organizations continue to grow, and this has also been seen as a struggle that is seen in the time they use during the work and also the visibility of all this for the management of the company or a business. So as a result, such things like absenteeism, overtime, declining productivity, compliance risks, these are often not seen and also they impact the business performance, but it is something that hasn't been paid attention to. So in today's session, we are going to talk about how organizations can simply move from collecting workforce data to using workforce intelligence to make better, faster, and more informed business decisions. So before we begin our webinar fully, a few housekeeping notes that you need to note is throughout this webinar, we encourage each one of you to participate in the chat box. Feel free to put in your questions, feel free to put in your comments, and mostly also tell us where you're from so that we can know who you are as part of the conversation as it goes on. All your questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar. So feel free to engage with us, put in your questions there, and we shall talk about the questions. We intend to make this as interactive as possible for everyone, because these are really conversations that we should have started having earlier, but luckily we are now getting onto them. So with that, without further ado, we're going to get started. I am pleased to welcome our first speaker for today's discussion. Joining us in this conversation is Makena Mantu, Group HR and Administration Lead at Adaptus Group, and a business unit lead for Mediacent Interactive. Makena brings extensive experience in workforce strategy, HR transformation, and organizational development, working with organizations across diverse industries to improve workforce performance, operational efficiency, and people management practice. Today, she shares practical insights into workforce intelligence, the challenges organizations are facing across Africa, and why workforce visibility has become a critical driver of business performance. Makena, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. So I'll let you say a quick hi, and then we can jump straight into the into the first question of the evening.
Thank you very much, Susanna. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. It's an absolute pleasure to also have the chance to discuss workforce management and go through some of the challenges that probably we have been able to see across the African market, that will then affect different either business leaders, HR teams, or managers. And yeah, we look forward to an insightful and engaging session. Thank you.
All right, awesome. That is Makena for you. Feel free to use an emoji reaction if you want to react to something, and also back again to the question box for you to ask any questions you have. So we shall jump right into it. Makena, what exactly is workforce intelligence, and why has it become such an important conversation for organizations to have today?
Interesting. So I think workforce intelligence is one of those issues that remains a constant fun, though sometimes quiet, because it does not, and which is common of our culture and how we tend to behave, it tends to be one of those things that come to the limelight as a reactive measure or once things have started going wrong, as opposed to something that we consistently have at the back of our minds to allow us manage teams better. So what is workforce intelligence? Ideally, it's the ability to turn your employee, or understand productivity, understand different elements that affect an employee. You're talking of payroll, attendance, productivity, leave, compliance. You're talking maybe of performance, learning all that into data that then drives business decisions. At the end of the day, workforce intelligence is not just knowing how many employees you have. It's about knowing where your workforce is productive, what is causing rises in costs, sorry, what the effect of absenteeism is to business operations. You're talking of compliance, what are your compliance risks? And what then becomes your gaps when you're looking at a future workforce planning, or when you're doing your workforce planning for you to be able to grow and expand. So from a Pan-African perspective, it's critical because organizations operating across different countries in Africa are managing different labor issues, different tax issues, different workforce cultures, currencies, compliance expectations. That means as from a manager, from a business leader perspective, you need to have different verticals for you to understand the different teams or the different employees that you have, especially when either A, you're working in different regions, or that could be different countries, or B, even counties within Kenya. Managing an employee, for example, in the south or in towards the coast is very different from managing an employee who then sits maybe towards Mount Kenya. The small things that you have to think about, say whether it affects how you deliver or not. So workforce intelligence ideally helps you have an all-rounded view of the people that you have in your company, and then use that business data to make decisions that will then drive or foment growth for the organization.
Wow, that's a very expanded question. And you've mentioned a couple of things where it all shows that organizations are really collecting large amounts of data, but are they using this data to make meaningful insights? So then this leads me to the next question. What is the difference between workforce data and workforce intelligence?
Interesting. Okay. So data, the very basic of it, or the lame version of it, is data is unprocessed. Or you have a report, but you don't know the why. The workforce intelligence needs you to know the why. I'll expound. So workforce data will tell you what has happened. Workforce data will tell you absenteeism in operations or in field was 12% or 10%. Workforce intelligence is understanding why that happened and what I need to do so that it does not happen again. So why it happened, what corrective measure I need to take now, and what I need to do so that it doesn't happen again. So workforce data tells you what happened. Workforce intelligence tells you what it means, why it matters, and what action you need to take, or what action leadership should take to course correct. So data, for example, will tell you, like I've mentioned, absenteeism was 12% last month. Excuse me. Intelligence will tell you absenteeism was highest, say, in the commercial department on Mondays, and that is linked to maybe a shift pattern that probably affects something else. Or a second example, think of a team with field engineers. You say absenteeism was at 10% last month. So your intelligence will tell you your absenteeism was highest in your service team or in your field team. This was highest, especially on Thursday and Friday. That means it's highest towards the weekend. And therefore, that is a pattern. It's a pattern that you're picking. So is it related to the shifts within the organization, or is it a cultural pattern that's getting created? Maybe guys go out over the weekend, and then subsequently the absenteeism of 12% in your field team is then affecting service delivery. Think of it differently. Payroll costs increased. That's what data will say. Data will tell you over the past 1 month, payroll has run by, say, payroll costs have increased by 5%. Intelligence will tell you, say, payroll costs increased because overtime rose by maybe 18% in two branches due to poor scheduling or due to business demand, or you did marketing and therefore the output of marketing, which is then new leads or new accounts or new clients, has then caused, the need for a team or the need for outsourcing. Therefore, the difference between the data and the intelligence is the understanding the why, the causes, sorry, what it means, why it happened, and what action we need to take. The distinction matters greatly across Africa because many organizations have data sitting in files, whether it's payroll files, Excel sheets, biometric systems, HR platforms, finance data, all that. But remember, the data is fragmented. The value for any organization or for any business leader comes when that information is then connected into one decision-making view. I believe your demo later on should be able to support this just by showing an example of some executive visibility dashboards or insights that can then be used to generate data. But at the end of the day, the insight and the data then needs business understanding. So workforce intelligence does not exist in a bubble. It must be coupled with actual business understanding by the leader or the executive that you have.
All right. Thank you very much for breaking down that workforce intelligence versus workforce data. I think it's pretty clear. I'd like to dig a little deeper into some of the challenges organizations face in the workforce. From your experience, what are some of the most common workforce challenges organizations across Africa are facing today?
Okay. Interesting question. Okay, so I'll break it into probably five or six areas or six challenges that I would then consider. It doesn't mean that I've exhausted the entire list, but what I'd say, these are some of the most common challenges that I have been able to see, having worked with different organizations across different countries. First of all, you talk about visibility. I've just mentioned we tend to have the data, but very fragmented. Therefore, visibility, when I talk about visibility, many leaders do not actually have real-time view of, say, headcount, team availability, workforce costs, productivity. This is actual data that as a manager, you need to be able to make a decision. Think of a project manager sitting somewhere in Nairobi who is required to manage, say, engineering projects across Africa. Visibility is critical for you to be able to determine which engineer is available. How many engineers do I have in the first place? Which engineer is available? What's the cost of sending this engineer to a site versus the cost of the job? How productive is this engineer? So visibility is one of those, or is one of the biggest issues that business leaders face when it comes to workforce management or workforce intelligence, or understanding the how to go about it. Second, I'd have compliance complexity. Remember, organizations are growing out of your local country marker or out of the borders. So compliance complexity. Any Pan-African or Kenyan business may deal with different compliance issues. You're talking of payee, you're talking of NSSF, you're talking of shift. Payee in Nigeria and payee in Kenya may be calculated very differently. UIF in South Africa, you're talking of something like SSNIT for Ghana. So all these compliance complexity issues also comes into play when you're trying to understand your workforce. I'll marry this with culture as well, so that some being able to understand these different complexities or compliance requirements aligned with the culture of the country or the region within which you're serving. Third, I'd use a skill mismatch. Africa has a young and growing labor force, but employers still struggle to find job ready, technical, digital, and managerial skills. Remember, Africa adds around 10 to 12 million young people to the labor market every single year, yet formal job creation has not yet kept pace. So, when you're talking about skills. A skills mismatch is being able to understand whether or not the skills that the job market requires for any role is aligned with the skills in this case that probably you have universities churning out or you have higher learning institutions churning out into the market. You're talking of the fourth one being informality and data gaps. Africa again has one of the largest or the highest levels of informal employment globally, with estimates showing about, I think it was about 85, 86% of employment in Africa is informal, which means which makes workforce planning, productivity measuring and social protection very different. When you have a population that is largely informal, remember they are largely or they're not being governed by quote unquote the employment acts of the different countries or the formal tools to govern. Therefore, being able to plan accordingly or being able to project then would be a challenge for different leaders. Then you're talking of cost leakages. So when you're talking of cost leakages, when it comes to your workforce, what are those costs that are running your business, but you cannot see or feel them until the effect is cumulative? So something as simple as absenteeism. Most business leaders do not feel the effect of absenteeism, you know, week on week until the day you have a client who is complaining, or until the day you have an account that's dropping off because your client is not satisfied with delivery, or until the day you have one of your big accounts complaining that your teams are inefficient or out of office, or we can't seem to get any support, or you're on social media trending somewhere because somehow your teams are not able to deal with that bit of the business. So cost leakage through things like absenteeism, overtime, manual payroll errors, ghost workers, poor scheduling, leave liabilities. They are quite a number. I think a while back, or rather one very common joke that went about, especially in Kenya some time back, was towards KPLC. And the joke used to be, if you want KPLC to fix your lights, you call them in the evening. Remember, that was running towards overtime. But at the end of the day, for the business, in this case KPLC, what became the cost, or what became the cumulative cost of running overtime for your teams daily, as opposed to actually managing or planning workforce well within the working hours? And then last but not least, retention and engagement. Employers now expect employees, not employers, employees in this case now are expecting growth, flexibility, purpose, fairness, better leadership. How then are we able to meet that and sustain engagement, sustain retention for the organizations? And they say in South Africa, for example, workforce intelligence may focus heavily on things like labor, shift, and unionized. In Kenya, maybe, for example, it may focus more on compliance, payroll visibility, distributed teams. In government, in Rwanda, maybe where you have a government-led digitization campaign that's very strong, then the opportunities in using workforce data to support planning and service efficiency. So the challenges are very different, but tend to they're the same, but they're different, and different markets have got different pressing points that will then drive the dynamics of that market.
That's a very interesting thing you've mentioned, especially the last bit, because I was just about to ask a follow-up question and ask then, are these challenges consistent across industries such as manufacturing, hospitality, retail, agriculture, etc.? Are the challenges still the same based on the key items you've mentioned?
So sometimes similar, but different industries have got different pressing points. If you look at the manufacturing industry, for example, um, one of the biggest focus points for manufacturing, especially around workforce management, is compliance. And the manufacturing industry is then hit by the compliance complexity, not by virtue of statutories per se, but you think of a factory and you think you need DOSH certification, you're thinking you need things like WIBA, you're thinking, up to a certain workforce size, you need to have like a nurse in house. All this is basic Kenya law. You're thinking of, say, the insurance covers you need. Then while you pick from that industry, you might go to a very different industry, say, like you've mentioned, retail or logistics. The element of retail or logistics is largely driven by team visibility, because the guys in the logistic, yes, compliance is an issue, but hey, being a safe driver is at the core of it. So visibility in that industry then affects, because you need to know how many guys do I have on site, how many guys have reported to my shift, how many team members, do I need to replace? Do I have, say, a pool of substitute drivers in this case for logistics firm? So visibility will affect them, might be more pressing in, say, logistics space than it would be in manufacturing or the administrative side of it. Or you might find maybe compliance is heavier in manufacturing than something else. So they tend to affect all industries, but different industries carry different weightage to their problems.
All right, so I'll just jump straight to the next question I'd like to ask. Why do organizations often discover workforce problems only after they've already affected operations?
Um, that's an interesting one, but it doesn't mean always.
Mhm.
One of the biggest realities is we are living in a data-driven space. So AI, BI, and analytics, those are realities of the workforce today. And those are realities that for us to be able to exercise um, best practices, especially when it comes to workforce intelligence, or get the most from that space, then these are tools that we have to use and be engaged in what we do. So why is it many organizations say discover their problems too late? Because most organizations are very reactive. A payroll issue is discovered when salaries are wrong. A compliance issue is discovered when you guys have gotten a letter from the government for an audit. A retention issue is discovered when you have your top talent resigning in a company, and that's when your business leaders are shook and they're like, but why is person X, Y, and Z resigning? Sorry. An absenteeism issue is being discovered when a client account is almost dropping off, or when now your managers have to be called in to go and woo a client back into good books. So the problem is not that leaders do not care, and that's a belief I have. It's for you to work in an organization, I'd like to believe it's that you care a little bit about the organization and the success, because I mean the success then affects you. But the problem is that workforce information is scattered. Workforce information, we do not take time to ingest the people that we have, and we assume the people are, automated. HR has one view, finance has another view, ops has another view. So that means we do not centralize how we think. By the time reports are consolidated, the issue has already affected costs, productivity, morale, etc. And that's why workforce intelligence matters. It gives leaders early warning indicators. Um, it lets you know what I need to start looking out for and when things are um, going wrong. In fact, one of the most interesting things or most interesting quotes around workforce intelligence is, or workforce management is, in workforce management, late visibility is expensive visibility. As long as you saw it late, it's going to be costing you something for sure.
Now, you've mentioned a lot of things about employees, and these are often referred to as, in general terms, HR issues, right? So let's now dig deeper a little. And what is the impact? You've mentioned slightly, but I want you to dig a little deeper. What is the real business impact of absenteeism, overtime, employee turnover, and poor workforce utilization?
Yeah, sure. It tends to, and that's why I think earlier I said one of the biggest shifts in the workforce today is that departments are no longer, HR is no longer HR, and HR cannot just be HR in a bubble. HR has to engage the business. Finance cannot be finance, in that corner office. Finance has to engage the business. So these issues of absenteeism, overtime, turnover, workforce utilization are not HR issues anymore. I think a large portion, what I'll say, progressive HR departments are shifting into what you call a business partner. So they're coming to the business and saying, excuse me, this is, say, absenteeism ratio, and this is what it's costing the business. HR has to see past the number. The business leader has to see past that number. So they cease to become HR related issues, they become business performance issues. Remember, something like absenteeism affects service delivery. Service delivery is not sitting in HR. Service delivery is, say, sitting in maybe operations as a department. That same absenteeism is also affecting customer experience. So while while your customers are getting their services late, operations is getting the heat of, product is getting to the client late, or what we needed is not getting on time. Customer service is getting the heat and being told that your teams, we are not happy with the customer satisfaction. While all this is happening, say your business developers or finance is complaining there's no revenue in the market, in the office. Why? Because service was late, customers are not happy, and commercial was late to work, therefore no one did their part. That becomes the ripple effect of something as simple as absenteeism. Think of overtime. Overtime will then cause, the minute your teams are permanently or on overtime, operations will feel it. Why? Because the quality of service goes down. Customer satisfaction, the customer facing team again will feel it because their customer satisfaction ratios are going down. HR, or rather any other manager, will feel it. Then what happens to your team? They take time off or they get absent. What else happens to your team? The cost of mistakes, the cost of errors. So these things are not standalone costs that we would then turn around and say, don't exist. You're thinking of turnover. Turnover affects recruitment. Recruitment is a cost, whether in time or money, depending on how you want to think about it. Onboarding time, something we take for granted, institutional memory. How are you able to retain that institutional knowledge and grow from there? Then poor workforce utilization means the business is paying for capacity but is not using it. It's like, in fact, the very basic example in life is like, you're single, you don't have kids, you don't have a family, but you live in a 5-bedroom house. You're paying for it, fine, but you already are not utilizing, you're not gaining the best there is from it. And globally, disengagement and low employee well-being are being linked to significant productivity loss. Gallup is estimating that the cost of low engagement to the global economy runs in trillions. We can't you're translating that, or the trillions, for you to calculate that, you have very different matrices that then assist you to come with it, but the impact is then a ripple effect across the organization. And remember, if you're handling pan-African or global business, it even becomes worse because the ripple effect is being felt outside, quote unquote, your region.
Well, these are really great insights you're mentioning. And as we almost come towards the close of the Q&A session, I'd just like to remind everyone that feel free to use the chat box to share your thoughts as well. Feel free to use emoji reactions if you hear anything that is there and you want to react to, and as well as the question box. We shall address all questions at the end of the webinar. So, Makena, as we come towards the close of this Q&A session, what workforce metrics should every executive team be reviewing consistently?
So I'll not say there is a fixed answer to it, because different industries have got different requirements in terms of what you need to look at. But every executive should have what they call a workforce scorecard respective to their industry. When I say that, you might find people who do not handle projects have got or might not be able to handle, direct or require direct workforce utilization, output, or different industries then drive different demands. So you're talking about something as simple as headcount, workforce costs, workforce cost as a percentage of revenue or operating costs. You then understand what becomes the breaking point for your team, or the break-even point for your team, or at what point should you not go below. It also allows you to plan, to do your strategic planning. You're talking of things like absenteeism, overtime, turnover rates, or time to hires. You're talking of productivity, you're talking of leave. Are you able to run performance matrices? Contracting is a very, we tend to ignore it, but it's critical in our market. And the most important thing is to pick what for your industry is a red flag, what for your industry, if goes wrong, is going to go, south, and gives you minimum room for course correction. So like I mentioned, in manufacturing, compliance is a very big deal, because assuming you're working from heights with no insurance and you fall down, then you're in trouble, and the organization is also in trouble. So the impact of that for any organization is very high. And their recommendation is different managers must have at least 5 6 things about their workforce that they must track. If it doesn't work, then at that point, to raise to raise, concern, because at that point you are sure in another 1 2 3 months, then this is bound to become a pain point.
All right. So finally, if every CEO, HR director, operations director, and also finance director could leave today's session remembering just a few important questions about their workforce, what should these questions be?
Okay, so I'll give maybe one for each role.
That's okay.
When I become a CEO, I'll add more. I'll be sure to come back and give some more. But um, maybe from a CEO's point of view, um, what are those critical roles that affect business growth, or where do our people risk largely? Like what is the largest risk that we face when it comes to people, and how does that affect business? Is our largest risk, say, sourcing? Are we able to have preempted that? What becomes the largest risk, and how does it affect business growth? Remember, your CEO is championed for growth, ideally in terms of the organization. Maybe operations. Do we have the right people in the right place, and are they sufficiently utilized? That if you answer that question, you've answered a lot of the questions, especially around ops. You're talking about finance. What is the truest cost? What is the true cost of our workforce, and how is this cost impacting business performance, or how is it aligned to business performance? Um, if you're talking of HR, probably because I sit from a HR point of view, I start with enable first, or train, enable your managers so that they are asking the questions as well. And say from HR, are you able to understand your business such that when you consume your reports, you can actually support the different line managers? Are managers making data informed people decisions? When a manager, for example, in ops say, I want to downsize my team, are they making a data informed people decision, so that you make decisions that are best for the business, as opposed to decisions that, say, come from your gut instinct? You're talking about organizations that are operating across multiple African markets. then the executive question is no longer how many employees do we have. It tends to morph into something like how is our workforce enabling or limiting performance in each of our different countries. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, yes, extensively. So thank you so much, Makena, for your session and also for your insights about the spaces and workforce intelligence as a topic. One message has come through very clearly. Organizations already have access to workforce data. The real opportunity lies in turning that data into meaningful insights that support smarter decision making, and especially in every department there is, because somehow the things that we've mentioned today about workforce intelligence do touch on the different departments. So to help bring today's discussion to life, we are going to now look at what workforce intelligence looks like in practice. I am pleased to introduce to you Chacha Wambura, our technical project manager at Mediacent Interactive. Chacha will take us through a practical demonstration showing how workforce dashboards and reporting can provide leaders with greater visibility into workforce performance, productivity, workforce cost, compliance, and planning. So over to you, Chacha.
Thanks, Susan. Great insights from Makena. And I think talking from a more practical source of view, it's very easy to ingest a lot of what Makena has shown as a very theoretical viewpoint. However, when you see the numbers, like she had mentioned earlier, in reports and actual numbers and dashboards, then it actually gives companies more insights on what they need to do with their workforce and how they need to engage with their workforce. So jumping into the data side of things, I'm just projecting the payroll side of the system just to give you a view of the analytics, what maybe a CEO would be looking at on a month-to-month basis, especially on the analytics side of things. As you can see here, it gives a basic overview of your employees, where they sit, the status of your employees, the distribution, the gender distribution, especially in your employee, that can also affect workforce. Your department analysis, you can see which departments holds the highest number of employees and why that is. Maybe a job group analysis, maybe you can see the number of employees are in a specific job group when they need to be in a different type of job group. A branch analysis, if you have different branches, why are all your employees stuck in one branch, things like that. Then if you take it down even more deeper, especially on the payroll side of things, then you can see, you can delve deeper in things like allowances that you're giving to your employees on a month-to-month basis. So for example, here, let's look at these allowance analytics. You can see the number of employees that have allowances versus the number of employees within the company. There's a difference. There's been a 5% increase in employees with allowances from last month, and maybe there might be due to some bonuses or things like that. But the average allowance amount or total allowance amount that you've given is 12,000 shillings. So with this kind of insights, you can, as a CEO, you can be like, okay, I've given more employees allowances, but if I look at maybe the profits that they're bringing in, it's justified or even warranted, right? I can see things like the allowance by department that I'm giving, the allowance by employees with allowance per department, and other metrics. Now, most of the analytics I'm showing you here from a payroll perspective, you can see they're mainly similar, but it gives you an insight on how your company is spending money, to which employee, to which department, and how deep you want to get it. But if we look at the overall overarching analysis for especially on the payroll side of things, this is where the rubber meets the road. Because this is where the CEO would be like, where are my numbers? So for example, you'll see here a month-on-month variance between the month of July versus the month of June. How maybe the employees have decreased. As you can see here, the employees have decreased by 13. 72% of the workforce has gone. So right now, in July, there's only 5 employees. So that means there must have been firing, or people have resigned, or whatever type of issue was in this company. The basic pay has gone down by 50%. However, the deductions have increased in the month of July. And the net pay, obviously, since the gross pay has deducted, the net pay will also go down, as you can see. So you can see the gross pay in June was this amount. Basic pay has gone down. So to a CEO, he's lost a lot of employees. However, his costs have also gone down significantly. Right? You can see the distribution per the number of employees, etc., etc. I don't know if there's any questions so far.
I think Chacha can just carry on. The questions shall be also addressed at the end of the session, and I've also shared a QR code for people to scan so that if any questions arise and are not addressed today, you can also reach out to us through the QR code.
Got it. Now, over and beyond the payroll master side of things and seeing the analytics on just from a payment standpoint, your employees are more than just what you pay them, you know, and you cutting costs and things like that. To allude to what Makena had been presenting earlier on, using a platform like Zoho People, while integrated to Payroll Master, can give you much more deeper insights to where your workforce is. So for example, you can see your headcount report here on Zoho People. So how's your headcount? How has it steadily grown over the years? I go back to a different organization report. I can see the leave booked and balance report. How many in my team of 5 who's booked and balanced, or who's booked some leave and time off, and which time they have done that, things like that. I can go back to my organization reports and look at the attendance rate. So for example, if you have a check-in process and things like that, or present and absent status, you can check and see which employees were present at what days and things like that. These reports can work hand in hand with payroll to give the company a bit of insights on where maybe per department or maybe per employee, how better to engage them in certain areas. Maybe a certain employee is feeling like, if I take the example of allowances, maybe a certain employee is feeling like they need a bonus or something like that, and they're asking for a bonus from the company. However, when you go to a performance, the performance report here, maybe their appraisal ratings, how your team were appraised, then you can see, okay, from your performance rating, if we have a structure in the company that if you overperform or excel, maybe a number 5 or above, then you're due to a certain amount of bonuses. So the analytics and reports, especially from Zoho People, all the way into Payroll Master, can have a linkage. Things with attendance, things with performance, also things with headcount. as well. Back over to you, Susan.
All right.
Allow me
Thank
to
you.
jump in.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I actually like what Chacha has mentioned because in the current times, one of the biggest things, or not even in the current times, one of the reasons you all have businesses is for money. So money and cost are always at the base of every business. But the things that Chacha is showing, for example, leave management. Leave management, we think of leave as, as an employee, you think of leave as time away from the company. Ask your HR person, leave is a cost. So you're not taking leave, you're already a different kind of expense to the organization at the very base of it. Think of something like performance. Businesses are expanding in how they are working. Businesses are no longer linear. They are no longer, I only work in Kenya to serve Kenya to only do this. Businesses are growing and saying, we are a Kenya-based business, but we serve Pan-African organizations, or we are running Pan-African businesses, or in this case, think of a project management firm, an audit firm, think of an construction firm. How then do you actually do planning? How then do you prepare to serve your teams if you cannot collate and understand the data that you already have? How does say, so in engineering and in the bottling space, one of the busiest seasons is December, because that's when we are all out and we are all out there enjoying ourselves. So that's when, or rather towards the festive season, is when they need to ensure that things are up to par. How does that company plan for that if they cannot tell their current workforce costs? How does it plan, for example, for which engineers will be on site if they cannot see their current, say, performance costs, or they cannot see their current OT? How do you plan for a busy season if you cannot understand what there is today, then understand the business cycles, then plan for it? So I like that Chacha is giving an array of reports, and again, these reports feed off each other for you to actually get the kind of intelligence that you'd then quote unquote need at any given time. Yeah.
All right. Thank you also, Makena, for that insight. I think also for me, this dashboards that we've seen today, to me, they don't only represent numbers, they help also leaders identify the trends, monitor workforce performance, anticipate some of the risks that would come in, and make more informed business decisions. So just straight jump into it. There's questions I wanted to ask. So we've spoken about organizations, spoken about attendance, we've spoken about the different areas that are involved in departments. As a listener of the webinar today, and also some of the things that might come up almost look like they're addressing only large organizations. So I'd like to ask, is workforce intelligence only relevant for large organizations? Maybe you can dive a little deeper into this, Makena.
Okay. No. Workforce intelligence is critical for all organizations. But the truth is, it also depends on where an organization is. A 70-person company, or a company that has 70 employees, still needs workforce intelligence for it to be able to manage, costs, productivity, compliance, etc. A 7,000 person company will still need it. Difference is the scale of workforce planning, or the complexity that then goes into mind. Small organizations may start maybe with the basics of headcount, attendance, payroll, leave, while you might find larger organizations might need things that are country center, costs, a country level reports, cost center management, maybe compliance, workforce forecasting. You find executives in such a space consume different kind of data from other teams. So it's not limited to the number of employees, but the reality is it is limited. It does the where you are as a business will then limit the application that you choose to take as an individual.
Okay, next question I'd ask is, how can workforce intelligence improve profitability?
Uh, so the base of it is profitability for any business is one of two things: more money or less cost. That's the base of profitability. It's either we keep our costs as is, we make more money, therefore we run more profit, or if we are not able to make more profit, we then scale down our costs so that the gap, then expands. So at the end of the day, for you to improve profitability, you have to reduce your cost leakage. You have to reduce your cost leakage. Remember, we had discussed cost leakages, and you have to improve productivity. Those two things have to come into play. Whether improved productivity is commercial, it is the service team, the commercial team bringing in more, it's the service team delivering more in terms of, say, projects or something like that. So workforce intelligence will then help your leaders identify unnecessary leakages. Unnecessary leakages will be unnecessary overtime, unnecessary, or rather, some absenteeism patterns that are negatively impacting the company, payroll errors that will then be costing the organization. Maybe for a tech company like Mediacent, poor deployment and what the effect of that is to the business, high turnover in terms of staff. So an example of this would be if a company, say, is in two countries. I'll use Kenya and Nigeria as an example. Then reducing overtime by improving shift planning then means you go directly to savings in terms of your bottom line. And then if you reduce turnover in critical roles, you then protect revenue continuity. So it's the base of being able to improve profitability would be minimizing or reducing your cost leakages, and then subsequently improving your productivity.
All right, another question that we've gotten a lot commonly is, can workforce intelligence help improve employee retention?
So maybe I'll pick this, having sat in HR. Chacha, if you have anything to add, please feel free. The answer is yes. The real answer is yes, because workforce intelligence helps you. Remember, we said it helps you see what is happening, understand the why it's happening, and therefore what decisions or what key things do you need to do as a leadership to prevent that. Retention issues, retention challenges do not appear overnight. They are usually signals prior to any sort of attrition in an organization, whether organization led or individual led. They are normally the signs towards attrition, and therefore your workforce intelligence can help ease. But the thing I'd say is it also needs a bit of the human, the human touch to the leaders in the organization. An example of that will be, you can tell my absenteeism rate is going high. The human bit of it is understanding why is it going high, if, say, it's a personal issue. So maybe something happened at home and I really am struggling to come to work. So workforce data is Makena is always late. Workforce intelligence is you sit down and have a conversation with Makena to understand why she's always late and how you can help as a business. How does that increase retention? Makena feels hard. Makena feels like her manager sees Makena for an employee and not a bot or, an automated machine somewhere or a robot that just generates output. But like I mentioned, then this needs enablement across the organization so that different business leaders, operations, finance, HR, customer service, tickets, all these guys can actually then drive the human bit of leadership to the people. And then when you combine that with intelligence, remember, intelligence is what? Data signaled the flag. Intelligence helped you understand. Humanity keeps the lead locked.
I love that statement you've said last. I think that is going to be a tagline on its own at some point. So let's dive deep a little back to the demonstrations we had today. Chacha, how often should workforce intelligence dashboards be reviewed?
Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, it depends on what metric they're trying to view. For example, there's different metrics: attendance, absenteeism, overtime, payroll cost, turnover, recruitment, compliance. Those are different metrics. Now, attendance and absenteeism and overtime should be reviewed weekly, I believe, because you want to have good attendance. You want to have your employees attend work as often as possible. Payroll costs, turnover, recruitment, and things like compliance should be reviewed on a month-to-month basis, because when you're running payroll, it's once a month, and you should always review those costs once a month. Succession planning, workforce planning, things like seeing the skill gaps. Like on Zoho People, there's a way where you can track the skills of your employees. Maybe a certain employee from the last performance cycle needed to upskill, get a new skill. Maybe it was in finance and they needed to get their CPA 2 or something like that. So that can be reviewed even quarterly. So it makes better strategic workforce planning in that sense from a quarter to quarter basis. But when you're looking at maybe, let's say, an overview of your whole HR analytics, then the overview planning should be done annually whenever maybe the business is transitioning to a new mode of working or things like that. I'll give a very good example. Maybe a logistics company may need weekly shift and overtime dashboards. Pan-African NGO may need monthly donor headcount because they're getting a lot of donations from other either companies and organizations and things like that. A fast-growing fintech expanding into another country or another region may need quarterly workforce planning because the business is growing so quick. So the metrics that that they want to review it really depends on the metric, and then it also depends on your business as well and where your business is heading, you know.
Okay, thank you for that, Chacha, as well. So this is the point where I also direct you to the chat box that is in this webinar. I have attached a link there that is for bookings. If you want to understand more about, want to do some workforce intelligence assessment, you can use this link to book. If you want to understand a bit more about Payroll Master, the demo dashboards that were shared with us with Chacha, you can book a session here. And then if you also want to understand more about Zoho People Plus, these are the different elements Makena touched on that are intertwined to create what is called workforce intelligence. You can also book a session there. And mostly you can continue chatting with us using the QR code we've shared here. So we are coming towards the end of the webinar, rather, we are coming towards the end of the webinar. And before I close, I'd just like to give Makena and Chacha literally 30 seconds to give you closing remarks, and then we can close the webinar. Before that, thank you again, everyone that has joined. This is just the beginning of the conversation about workforce intelligence. And the aim of this webinar is to have these conversations with you, not just to tell you what is there in the market or give expert experience, but to have this conversation so that we are helping you address the sessions, and at the same time using the development team at Mediacent Interactive, we're able to address different dashboards. We're able to look into different elements that are there that would help you reinforce your workforce intelligence at your organization or your business. I've put polls there that you can interact with, and now I'll give a chance to Makena first and then Chacha next, and then we can close from there.
Okay. Thank you, Suzanne, for having me. It was fun talking about this. I think this is something we do every day, but the right conversation needs to be had in the market. So I think for me, Africa has the world's youngest and fastest growing workforce. Our challenge is not a lack of talent, it is a lack of visibility into how we unlock that talent at scale. Organizations that invest in workforce intelligence today will be the ones that will be shaping um, Africa's economic story tomorrow. The future of work is not won by organizations with the most amount of data. It will be won by organizations that turn data into decisions, decisions into action, and action into measurable business performance. Workforce intelligence is no longer a HR initiative, it is now a required business imperative for all business leaders sitting at any level of the organization.
Yeah, I would also just echo what Makena said. I mean, it's really important, especially in the African context as well. Like Makena had mentioned, we have such a youthful, young workforce, and the organizations that are even starting, even startups, I would say, the earlier they jump onto workforce intelligence and having data-driven decisions at the onset, it makes their decisions moving forward much more easier to have, especially within the HR side of the business, you know. So yeah, it's really imperative, really important. Even if your company, you feel like it's very small, where you feel like all of these items might not be looking well for you, but it's something that you can plan and phase on. Like McKenna had said earlier, you can even start with just headcount, simple payroll, run, and build as your workforce also grows. It's only better when you grow your company as you're growing the departments within your company at a steady rate.
I really like the last insights you've mentioned. Today's discussion has highlighted also another important thing. Organizations don't need more workforce data. They need better workforce visibility. By understanding the right workforce metrics and using them effectively, leaders and also business owners are better positioned to improve productivity, strengthen accountability, manage compliance, and make more informed decisions that support long-term business performance. We hope today's session has provided practical insights that you can take back to your own organizations and even businesses and share with other people as well. If you'd like to continue this conversation, our team is happy to support you with our workforce intelligence assessment, discuss your workforce management requirements, and also demonstrate how our solutions can support your organizations. From the polls also that we've shared, we see this cuts across in terms of the needs that all of you of our audience have today. And lastly, I'd also like to thank our audience who has been here. Thank you for creating the time, making this time to have these discussions with us. This is, like I said, the very first episode of the Workforce Excellence series. We intend to do more of this. So look out for our next webinar. And you will also be getting this webinar recording on your inboxes. So feel free to review them again. Let us know what questions you have. Let us know what more topics you want us to address. And also let us know your feedback on this and get in touch with our team. We are always ready to help. So thank you once again, Makena, for sharing your insights. Thank you, Chacha, for demonstrating how workforce intelligence can be applied. And thank you for the practicality of this conversation as it is, and also seeing how it looks actually in the business space. So with that, we look forward to hosting you for our next webinar, and have a lovely evening wherever you're joining us from today.